Hello, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. I'm glad that you're able to join us today. I want to introduce you to our guests. And Kevin, thank you so much for being here today. Kevin is the chief of the IRS District Congressional Liaison Branch. And it is a pleasure to have you with us here today, Kevin. I invited Kevin to join us because we have been hearing from so many constituents about some really pretty commonly shared questions that constituents have pertaining to this 2020 tax filing season. So it's my hope that this interview and series of questions that I'll be asking to Kevin will be of value and a resource to constituents to ensure that we're clearing up any questions that they may have and also getting ahead of some of the questions that they surely have surrounding this year's tax season. So again, our guest today is Kevin McKeon. I'm glad that he can join us. And before we get started with the questions, Kevin, would it be possible for you to provide us with a quick overview of some of the key things that people across Central Virginia should know during this tax filing season?
Well, thank you very much, Abigail, for inviting us on. As we all know, we're, in the full swing of the tax season, and, we're all working our way through various COVID-19 situations. From IRS, we've doing the best we can to help as many people as we can get out information, help them file their taxes. The tax season did begin in early February. It is now extended until May 15th. So people do have, May 17th, and the reason is the 15th is on a weekend day. So we extended it to May 17th, so that applies to, all the individual tax filers. So we do have time to get those returns in. The biggest thing that, has been going on with taxes, obviously, is the economic impact payments. And I know we're going to talk about those a little bit later. But we're doing everything as quickly as possible to get those out. In terms of people filing their returns, we want them to, preferably when they file their returns, use e-file because that's the fastest way to file their return. Roughly 90% of people already do anyway, but paper returns take longer, and especially in this pandemic environment, we're encouraging them to go with the electronic filing and use direct deposit for their refunds. And again, they have till May 17th to file their return. IRS.gov is the best place to go for information about tax filing. There's frequently asked questions, there's interactive tax assistant, there's loads of information on there, and really this time of year, we're always busy on our phone lines, Abigail, but this time of year even more so, and we don't have as many phone assisters as we'd like to, but we do have the phones, but we encourage people first, go to irs.gov, get answers that way. We have some new services this year to help with multilingual community. We have the Form 1040 and the Form 1040 SR now available in Spanish. And also there's a new form to allow taxpayers to request they receive information in their preferred language. So that's new this year.
That's great.
Another new thing that people should remember is new for this tax year 2020 is non-itemizers can deduct $300 for charitable cash contributions. So if they made those $300 and they don't itemize, and most people don't nowadays because of the law change a couple of years ago, they can get the benefit of those $300 in charitable contributions. Just a couple other things, and in terms of filing, like I said, e-file, it's the best way to file. It's the fastest, most accurate way of filing. You want to file a complete and accurate return to avoid refund delays. You can do your taxes for free online or in person. We have the IRS Free File program and free file fillable forms off irs.gov. You can go to a tax preparer. You can buy tax software. You can also check out the volunteer income tax assistance sites and the tax counseling for the elderly to go to get help for qualified taxpayers. some of those sites, and I'm sure you're aware of this, Abigail, that some of them are virtual now, or they're a drop-off service because of the pandemic. And thank you, by the way, for your support for those sites. So again, do everything as much as possible in terms of tax filing electronically. Make your tax payments electronically. You can even view your tax account online. There's a way to set that up, and that's a good feature for people.
So, Kevin, before we get into the more detailed questions, you mentioned that the filing deadline is now delayed until May 17th. Do people have to do anything in order to utilize that date, or is it just blanket everyone is extended? Can you clarify that?
That's a great question, Abigail. And basically, we just did that, announced that, Treasury and IRS announced that earlier, I think it was just recently. But no, it's for individual tax filers. They do not have to do anything special. Just let April 15th slip on by if they want. But it's always best to claim and file as soon as possible, because you'll get your refund quicker that way, having said that you got the extra month. But we know that people may need it, so they don't need to do anything special. And, if, they can't make May 17th, they can get an extension into October 15th. But they have
and
to
that's the normal process that one would go through to file for an extension.
That's absolutely correct, yeah.
Excellent.
They make a payment about the estimated taxes that they owe to get them into the October 15th period.
Excellent. Well, Kevin, let's talk about stimulus checks and the recovery rebate checks that Congress put out. So many of my constituents have contacted me about not having yet received the most recent check, and in some cases, the one before that. In general, what are some of the reasons that someone might not have received their check yet?
Okay, so we're already into EIP, what we call economic impact, or EIP 3, where the folks are getting checks, payments of $1,400 or so. The EIP 1 back in March, and the EIP 2 back in January or so, those have all been, paid out with some exceptions, but there's a way to get that money if they're entitled to it. And I guess and first off, the government, Treasury and IRS, and our sister agency, the Bureau of Fiscal Services, we are, and will be committed to getting those payments out as quickly as possible. And so the quickest way to get the payments out are with direct deposit into people's bank accounts. So where we have that information, we're able to send it out to their direct deposit into their bank account.
And so then let me ask a follow-up. And these, to everybody watching, these are the questions that we're getting every day from constituents. And so we're hoping that through asking these frequently asked questions directly of the IRS, that you all can hear directly from Kevin about what's happening. So Kevin, I know that you can claim the first 2 EIP payments on your 2020 tax return if you did not receive them, but you believe you were eligible. So that's if someone did not receive what's commonly referred to as the stimulus checks 1 and 2 last year, but they think that they're eligible because of their income. Can you talk about what the process is for them to claim that on their 2020 tax return?
Absolutely. Okay. So if for some reason you didn't get all of the EIP 1 or 2 that you feel you're entitled to, you're going to want to file your 2020 tax return and claim the recovery rebate credit. And that's a line, I believe it's line 30 on your tax return. And, when you e-file, which again, most people do, and it's recommended, the software is going to do all the calculations for you. On paper, you can do it also, but, you're going to have to do a little calculation on it. So for those folks who did not get the EIP 1 and 2, they're able to get that off the recovery rebate credit. And now some people may have already filed their 2020 tax return, and maybe they forgot to claim, the recovery rebate credit, or they, it just slipped their mind. So what they would need to do is to file an amended return and claim the recovery rebate on that. Now, The amended returns take longer than regular returns,
Okay.
but that is an option for people who missed out on the EIP and they were 1 and 2 and they were qualified for it.
And Kevin, you mentioned people who have already filed their 2020 tax returns. And so I want to make sure that people know that the most recent round of EIP payments, what you're calling EIP 3, commonly referred to as just the most recent stimulus check, that money is going based on the most recent tax return on file. So for those who haven't filed their taxes, that would be their 2019 return. For those who have already filed for 2020, that would be their 2020 return. Is that correct? And anything else you would add about if someone's already filed their tax return, and again, if they believe that they were eligible, just confirming that they would have to do an amendment. Is that right?
For EIP 1 and 2, the first 2 stimuluses, they need to do the recovery rebate credit on their 2020 return. If they forgot to do that and need to, they can file an amended return.
Great.
For the third stimulus, the EIP 3, those are going out now. We've put out a bunch of them. And also, let me just say that, like I said, we try and do direct deposit whenever possible because that's the fastest way.
Mm-hmm.
The next fastest way to get that money out is to use what we call EIP debit cards. And the Bureau of Fiscal Service has a vendor wherein they work with that vendor. It's like a credit card, and they will send out the debit card for folks to get their economic stimulus payment on that. So some people may still, if they haven't gotten the debit card yet for the third stimulus, they may still be getting that.
And they'll be getting that based on whichever taxes you all have on record, 2019, correct. In most cases, 2020, if people have filed already.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Excellent.
So I just want to remind people about those debit cards because those were used in the first 2 stimuluses, and in the beginning, we heard from people saying, well, I got this thing in the mail, and it looked like a credit card, but I thought it was a scam, and I threw it in the garbage can. And so, they had to take a few steps to get that reissued to them. So if you get one of those cards in the mail, please don't throw it away. Follow the instructions that are in the letter. We also have that up on the IRS.gov website, and, they can, activate that and use that money.
And are those debit cards coming from IRS? Is it marked that it's IRS?
I believe they're issued by the Bureau of Fiscal Service within Treasury. I think there may be a Treasury indicia on the envelope, and so, but we have all that on IRS.gov.
Excellent, thank you. So as part of the American Rescue Plan, and just shifting gears to taxing unemployment benefits, as part of the American Rescue Plan, Congress, provided that the first $10,200 in federal unemployment benefits is exempted from federal income taxes for households making less than $150,000. Does this exemption apply only to unemployment benefits in 2020, or does it also apply to benefits in 2021?
It applies to benefits in 2020.
Excellent. All right. And when we're talking about the definition of a household for purposes of that maximum threshold, we've gotten a lot of questions from people who are trying to understand what is that maximum threshold for their household income. Could you just explain to everybody how that's calculated?
Yeah, at this time, we don't have specific guidance on that. We're working to review all the provisions of the law, and as soon as possible, we'll put that up on our website.
And when we're talking about the fact that, so again, for people who may not have heard the first question, Congress has provided that the first $10,200 in unemployment benefits will be exempt from federal taxes below a household threshold of $150,000. But I'm curious, could you talk a little bit about whether this is in phases or whether household income levels receiving less or more, that the exemption levels will change, or if that's a hard number?
Yeah, that's another thing where we don't have guidance on yet, and we apologize for not having all that information, but you know, we're doing our best to process all the provisions of that law, and there's a lot of stuff in there, so you know, we want to give the best info possible, and so as soon as we get it, we'll post it to irs.gov.
Thank you. And for those who are just joining, I'm joined today by Kevin McKeon, who's the chief of IRS District Congressional Liaison Branch, and he's joining to answer some of the frequently asked questions that I've been receiving from constituents. And Kevin, I appreciate the fact that on some of these, the answer is we don't have an answer yet. And certainly that's what we've been telling some of our constituents who've been calling with some of these same questions. And to your point, part of the reason is the American Rescue Plan is a massive piece of legislation. I know I supported it, worked on it, and voted for it. And so the rulemaking and the details that we put on IRS to put these plans and this legislation into action sometimes takes a little bit. But that's frankly one of the reasons, am I right, that IRS has extended the deadline for tax filers to May 17th of this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's helpful to tax filers to have all the information in place. Absolutely.
Excellent. So if someone who received unemployment in 2020 filed their 2020 tax return prior to the passage and enactment of the American Rescue Plan, do they need to now file an amended return in order to have that $10,200 in federal unemployment benefits be exempt on their income taxes?
That's a great question, Abigail, but at this time, we're advising folks to not file an amended return. I think the hope or the intent is to try and make a fix on our end, so we'll be able to fix it for people so that they don't need to file amended returns.
Excellent. So at this point, if you've already filed your 2020 tax returns and you are eligible for that, to have that portion be untaxed, no need to take action. Ideally, the IRS will fix it on their end and make that shift in your return. Perfect. That's great, Kevin.
Thank you.
So talking a little bit about amended tax returns, are there any unusual provisions that you encourage individuals to look out for this year so they don't have to amend their tax returns? I think you started talking about some of them in your introductory comments, but for those who have joined us through the course of this Facebook Live, if you wouldn't mind touching on what new or unusual provisions may exist this year, that would be great.
Sure. Probably the biggest thing is the recovery rebate credit. And again, that is where the constituent or the taxpayer did not receive the full amount of the stimulus payment 1 or 2 that they should have. And so there's a way to get that, the benefit of that stimulus payment, by filing for the recovery rebate credit. And so if you've already filed a return and you need that recovery rebate credit, you can go ahead and file an amended return for that. Another new thing that people should be aware of is if they made $300 in cash charitable contributions and they're not itemizers, they can claim that on their return. So if they missed out on that when they filed, they could do an amended return on that. But yeah, recovery rebate credit, that's probably the biggest thing this year. Excellent.
And, you know, I think across the board, so many businesses, everybody's been impacted by the pandemic, and particularly in the early days, when it was not safe to have workers out kind of in the offices. So, you know, across the board, I know a lot of government agencies, just like businesses, continue to face some challenges and backlogs because of some of the initial COVID-related lockdowns. And so I'm curious if you could speak a little bit about what potential delays or backlogs may exist in processing, particularly paper returns and amended returns from 2019, and give us a status update on that, and if you expect any potential delays for people who will file an amended return this year.
So, as we know with COVID, you know, we had to shut down a lot of our offices and go ahead and work remotely. And so you know, the offices or campuses, what we call them, where they do a lot of the paper return processing, those offices were closed for some time due to health reasons till we could, you know, reconfigure them so that it was safe to work at those sites. And so there is and was, you know, a backlog in terms of filings for the, you know, 2019 tax returns. And so there's still a backlog for the 2019 returns that have not yet been processed. And, you know, we hope to dig out from under that backlog by the summer.
Okay.
And, you know, get those returns processed. And we're sorry if it's causing folks to, you know, be waiting on their refund any longer than they need to. But we are, you know, working as best we can. And some of those that are in the backlog, we've sent out letters to people, you know, saying we need more information. So, you know, people should respond to those as soon as possible. Now, even if they do have a return in the backlog for 2019, they can still go ahead and file their 2020 tax return. And again, as in all filings, the best way to file the 2020 return is electronically. It's fastest and most accurate. And if they don't know what their AGI is for 2019, or if it's stuck in the backlog, they can just go ahead and put a zero amount in the section for adjusted gross income.
And just for people listening, AGI is adjusted gross income. And so you can just put a zero in for that. That's excellent to know. So part of the deadline or part of the delays that we saw because of COVID and continue to see is, does that most predominantly impact those who file with paper?
I would say so, mostly with paper, yeah, because you know, when those campuses were closed, you know, mail was being delivered and, you know, nobody, you know, it was put in a secure area, but we weren't able to open it and process the returns or the checks. So, yeah, it's caused some problems. And again, apologize to everybody who's been impacted by that. We do have a section on our website under the coronavirus tax relief tile, which is on the front page. You click on that, and then you go to the IRS operations page. It gives status of the various processes that IRS has, and it gives specific information for people in situations like the 2019 delay, for example. Other sections about collection notices that may have gone out. So, yeah, people can check up on that.
Excellent, Kevin. And just for those who are just now tuning in, we have with us today Kevin McKeon, who is the chief of the IRS District Congressional Liaison Branch. And he's joining us to answer some of the most frequently asked questions that I've been hearing from constituents across the 7th District. And Kevin's mentioned a couple times the IRS website. And for those of you joining, that's irs.gov. And the website has been formatted to reflect COVID-19 coronavirus related specific information. On the homepage, there is information specific to coronavirus related tax relief and is a really good source of information. So I wanted to make sure that you all are aware of that. And at the beginning of the conversation, we spoke a bit about the filing deadline extension. And for those who might be joining midway through, I do want to highlight that. The IRS recently extended the federal tax filing deadline until May 17th, and this applies for everyone. So you don't have to do anything in addition to file your taxes on time by that May 17th deadline. And but for those who will need an extension beyond that, that's the traditional process. Is that right, Kevin?
Absolutely, yeah. If they need more than May 17th, they can go ahead and file for an extension. They can do that electronically, and that'll get them into October 15th, and they do have to make a payment. You can do that electronically, of course, of the amount of taxes they think they owe. That way they avoid interest and penalties that might be charged on a late return.
Excellent. So we've heard from many constituents about some of the challenges that they've had in getting in contact with an IRS representative over the last year. Kevin, you and I have talked a little bit about how because of COVID in the early days of the pandemic, some of your campuses were shut down and did make it harder to contact representatives. So at this point in time, looking into the future, what's your best recommendation for people who want to be in contact with the IRS, who need to get answers to their questions? What are some of the steps that they can and should take to ensure that they're getting what they need from the IRS?
Okay, thank you, Abigail. And by the way, thank you and the staffers in your office for everything you all have been doing during the pandemic time, because I know come last March when the first stimulus payments came out, it was sort of like the perfect storm for us, because basically we had to shut down almost all of our sites and send people to work at home. And so most of our phone numbers were not working. And so no one, people were trying to call, when am I going to get my stimulus and that sort of thing. And basically your office, and other congressional offices were inundated with calls, and, they would call us and we'd try and give you the best information possible. But so I know it's been a really tough time for people. And normally for us during the tax filing season, our phone lines are super busy, and people are always saying it's hard to get through. We don't have the level of service that we would like, and we feel bad about that, but we're doing the best we can with the resources we have. The number one thing I could tell people is go to irs.gov. That is the best source to get information, frequently asked questions. With the economic impact payments, the stimulus payments, we have the Get My Payment tool on there that's operational now for the third stimulus. So that is still there. People who have smartphones, by the way, we have an app for IRS to go. They can access the site through their phone. We do have our regular telephone numbers are back online, after that bad period when a lot of people were, out because of health issues. We do have a special phone number for economic impact payments for stimulus, and that number is 800-919-9835. Again, that's 800-919-9835. But again, for this third stimulus that we're on, if you didn't get it already, I would wait a while, because even though we put out millions already, we're probably in the process right now of doing paper checks. Those take a little longer than the direct deposit. So, wait a little while before contacting us. And even again, I would say go on irs.gov, because check the coronavirus page. And there's lots of FAQs on the EIPs, the economic impact payments. If you use a tax preparer, they're a resource for you. People who qualify, we have the free tax help sites. Those are great to help people. And we also have our taxpayer advocate service. So, there is ways to get help. You may have to be more patient than you'd like to be, and I can understand that. But just bear with us.
Well, thank you for that, Kevin. And certainly our office has heard from many constituents seeking help and a little bit of guidance, and we're happy to provide that when we can. But I truly appreciate your office's support in helping our constituents and in answering some of these really important questions. I think that we focused on a little bit of the challenges that IRS, like so many other organizations, are facing, and in particular because IRS is responsive to so many of the challenges that my constituents and people across the country are facing in terms of the earnings that they do or don't have, and the stimulus checks that they are or are not getting. And so I do have maybe one more question on this topic of some of the delays. And that relates a bit to people who are still, who perhaps due to the pandemic and some of the challenges related to telework, that individuals are still waiting for their 2019 returns that have yet to be processed. We've heard from constituents who've said that they're still waiting on their 2019. And so I'm curious, I'm sure that impacts just a small portion of the population. But for those who may be impacted by that, is there a timeline for finishing out those 2019 returns?
Yeah, I mean, we're working as hard as we can to get those returns done, finished, and refunds out for those folks. And we have sent letters to some of those people where we require additional information. So, and I encourage everybody to respond as quickly as possible to those letters. We hope to get through with that backlog by the summer, is the latest I've heard, yeah.
And for people who their return hasn't yet been processed, has that impacted their ability to get the economic impact or the stimulus checks if they were eligible?
It may have an impact on them. However, well, actually, for the first 2 stimulus payments, they can go ahead, if they didn't get all they were entitled to, they can just go ahead and file a 2020 return, tax return, and claim the recovery rebate credit and get the first 2 stimuluses off that. It kind of brings me up thinking of a point that I definitely want to mention, and that is for non-filers, for people who don't traditionally have to file a return, Abigail. Most of those folks are going to be entitled to a economic impact payment, a stimulus payment. And we had, for the 3rd stimulus, if they use the non-filer tool that we had last.
And Kevin, let me stop you really quickly. Could you just explain to those who might be watching who are traditional non-filers? So who might we be talking about? This might be people watching or someone, a family friend or neighbor. So who are those individuals? Okay,
so those are people who they don't have enough income that would require them to file a tax return. And some of the folks may unfortunately be homeless, you know, so maybe it's harder for them to, you know, get to a computer to file a return. But, you know, those folks, if they're entitled to the stimulus, they're citizens, they have a Social Security number and all those requirements, we want them to get their stimulus payments. And I know we did a lot of outreach last year to make sure that folks who were in that situation as non-filers or homeless or whatever, that they were able to file a return to get their stimulus. And so, and if people did that last year, they used the non-filer tool, they should automatically be getting the 3rd stimulus. Okay. And by the way, that's really, I mean, our goal with the 3rd stimulus is pretty much was the 1st and 2nd, is to make these payments automatically so that people would not have to do anything special. But as we know, there were people in some circumstances that did have to do something special, such as a non-filer, they'd have to file a return. And we did have that special tool, that non-filer tool, last year. So if they used that, if we had their information from last year, we were able to go ahead and send the 3rd stimulus to them. Having said that, there may have been people who never used the non-filer tool last time or didn't file a return or whatever. They're still out there, and you know, we want them to come in and file a return this year. And they can do it through e-file. They can go to a VITA site or a tax counseling for the elderly site. I know we're making efforts to work with our partners. We've got a lot of great partners that work with us, as you know, on the volunteer help sites. To spread the word, you know, that this exists and that people should file a return to get that. So if you know people, you know, spread the word. So Kevin, 2 follow-up questions there. You mentioned seniors in that group. Is this group predominantly seniors who would be the non-usual filers, or does it break down across? Well, seniors are, you know, there may be some seniors in the homeless population or non-filers, and I mean, certainly if you're a senior and you receive federal benefits such as Social Security, veterans benefits, or railroad retirement benefits, you're going to be covered because what we did is we worked with those agencies on the first two stimuluses to get their information and make the payments as they would normally get those federal benefits. So, and the third stimulus, we're doing the same approach. I do believe we're, getting the information from those agencies, and we will, as soon as possible, get those stimulus, the third round of stimulus payments out to them. However, if they're not on those benefits, and we don't know about them, they didn't use the non-filer tool this year or this past year, yes, they need to come in and file, get a return done. So
for those who are listening, if you have a loved one who receives Social Security benefits, who isn't working, as long as they are in the federal system receiving Social Security benefits or receiving veterans benefits, IRS would have done the behind the scenes work to coordinate and find out who those individuals were, even if they hadn't filed. That's
right. And that includes SSI as well.
Excellent. Well, and then outside of the pandemic then, do you typically recommend that those who don't have a need to file because of the income threshold, because they don't make enough, is it generally speaking a good thing for people to go through and fill out the paperwork as a non-filer, or was it really just important because of the pandemic? Are there other benefits to doing that people should be aware of?
Well, yes. I mean, I'm not going to say everybody should file a return if they don't have the income, but there are some benefits that they may be entitled to related to tax credits, possibly the earned income tax credit, possibly, depending on they have children, there are some changes upcoming, I think, that you alluded to earlier about expanded child tax credit. So if they have children, they definitely may want to look into that. And by the way, the child tax credit, the expanded child tax credit, that's another one of those things that we don't, have all the guidance for. But I think the goal is to have more information out and build out a new portal for those folks that are entitled to that and may get the benefit of that by late summer, I believe, in July or maybe late summer.
So, and just to talk a little bit about that, the child tax credit, Kevin, in the American Recovery Plan, or American Rescue Plan, excuse me, we did make those child tax credits refundable and also increase the amount. Could you just explain a little bit more to those who are watching what that means, the shift to making it refundable, and remind folks what that child tax credit is and who's eligible?
Yeah, I don't have all the guidance on that, but in general, the child tax credit, is available to people who, of course, have children. There are income restrictions to it. Prior to, I think, the law change, it was not refundable, but now I do believe under the new law it will be.
That's right.
And also, I believe there's going to be, like this portal that I was mentioning, there is the intent in there to make periodic payments of this. In other words, instead of waiting for your refund at the end of the year, there may be the ability for us to send out periodic payments to help people before, when they get their tax return. And again, all the guidance on that is not out yet, but it's definitely good news for children. Children and really their parents.
And families with children. Well, and just Kevin, thanks so much for answering a couple questions about that. For anybody who's watching, with the American Rescue Plan, we did increase the child tax credit and make it refundable, which means that people will be eligible to actually receive dollars back and not just kind of tick it off of their income amount. This is particularly beneficial for people on the lower end of the income scale, but frankly will impact most families across the country that do have younger children. Our office will be providing a lot more information about this, the child tax credit, as more of the rulemaking and details come out, as Kevin mentioned. So if you're not signed up for our newsletter, please feel free. You can go to spanberger.house.gov, sign up for our newsletter. and we'll be sending out periodic updates about elements of the American Rescue Plan, and in particular this, if the refundable child tax credit, which there is, as Kevin mentioned, rather than waiting for that refund next year at tax filing season, people will be eligible for periodic payments in advance, so that you don't just get that one large refund all at once. So thank you for touching on that, Kevin. Kevin, I've got a question about the CP 59 notices. These are tax delinquency notices. We've heard from some constituents who've been very worried that they got a CP 59 notice incorrectly. So that's somebody who got notified that they're delinquent on their taxes, but they believe that they paid their taxes in 2019, and they're worried. They're worried their tax returns might be in the backlog. They're worried their tax returns have not been processed. So if an individual receives this notice, but they know they filed their taxes, what should they do?
Okay, so first off, I hate getting notices in the mail from IRS or letters in the mail. I mean,
and you work for IRS, Kevin?
I'm getting letters. Uh-oh, what is it? So I can absolutely understand why people might be concerned when they get a letter, especially one of the CP, the CP letter notices. And also bear in mind that we have on our website, another reason to go to irs.gov is to look at a feature called Understanding Your Tax Notice. And I believe we have a listing of probably many of the notices that we do send out. And so you can see right on there what the particular notice is about. I mean, the letters that we have, I know we've made a big effort to improve them, the readability and whatnot over the years. But it is a little intimidating, I have to say, to get one of those letters. But for this particular notice, the CP 59, we have a statement out about that. And what that is they paid their taxes, but their 2019 returns are still in the backlog. And I know we've talked about the backlog, that we're trying to get through that as soon as possible, and hopefully by summer we'll be done. But the statement about the C59 says, people who filed their 2019 return but nevertheless received the C59 notice can disregard the letter and do not need to take any action. There's no need to call or respond to the C59 notice because the IRS continues to process 2019 tax returns as quickly as possible. And we regret, that is the IRS does, any confusion caused by this mailing. So sorry about that, and we're glad they asked about it because, the other thing that we always say is, don't ignore any notice that you get in the mail from IRS, because a lot of times the notices are maybe you made a mistake and you owe more money. And of course, when that happens, there's usually interest and penalties that apply. And those accrue, continue to build up until it's responded to. I mean, granted, it may be an error that we made, and just tell us that and we'll fix it. But, don't ignore the notice. But in this case, the C59, we have explicit instructions on our site you can ignore that. And hopefully, not too many more people will get those.
And because we have had this question, and particularly in recent months, or in past months after the filing time frame for last year, is that basically, just so people are curious, how does this still happen? Is it a function that their tax returns are on paper and need to be logged, need to be inputted in the system, but yet IRS is saying this is not a completed tax return, so that's an automatic letter that goes out? Meanwhile, the reality is that you all know that those returns are in paper, waiting to go into the system.
That's absolutely correct, Abigail. It's we have automated processing. We have a number of programs, Under Reporter, for example, wherein if a company sends us a 1099 income notice that you paid out $10,000 in interest to John Doe, and John Doe's return comes in, and nowhere is that $10,000 in interest, that's like an Under Reporter type thing, and we would generate an automatic notice for that. So yeah, I mean, there are some automated things, and you know, when you have a backlog like this, sometimes there'll be things that we just can't stop.
And Kevin, those letters still have to go out because some people didn't actually file, so you do need to send the reminder. So I understand the challenge there. Well, you know, I've got another question related to health savings account contribution, and I know this is not necessarily your purview, and but I just wanted to raise it for those who have tuned in. We've been told that the HSA, the Health Savings Account Bank, is not issuing certain forms, in particular the 5498 SA for 2020 HSA contributions until May, because contributions can still be made through April 15th. In your capacity over at IRS, are you hearing the same thing? Do you know this information to be accurate? And how would this perhaps impact somebody's ability to file their taxes? Are they necessary, or are they informational only?
Okay, that's a great question, and I really didn't know the answer to it, so I checked with one of my colleagues to see what the status is on that. And the form, that 5498-SA form, that's used to report contributions to a health savings account, and it's for informational purposes, and it's not required to file a tax return. However, IRS publication 969, so folks who have HSAs may want to check out that publication because it deals with health savings accounts.
Okay.
On page 8, Form 8889 reminds you that you should report all your contributions to your HSA on Form 8889 and file it with your form. You should include all contributions made for 2020, including those made from January 1st, 2020 through April 15th of 2021 that are designated for 2020. Contributions made by your employer and qualified health savings account funding distributions are also put on the form. So folks who have that question, you know, again, take a look at IRS publication 969, page 8. That gives more details.
And that the form that you mentioned is 8889. And IRS publication 169, I'm assuming that's available at irs.gov?
Yes, publication 969 is definitely available on irs.gov. And if I might put in a plug for IRS forms and publications, do I have a second to put in a commercial?
You do. You know, Kevin, that's the end of the questions that I have for you. So I would love any other bits of information, things you think people need to know, the best way to contact IRS, the best way to get answers to questions. I would open it up to you to make sure if I haven't touched on it and people need to know it, what would you tell us?
Okay, thank you, Abigail. You've asked some great questions, and it's been a great discussion. Forms and publications. You know, back in the day, you know, probably before your time, Abigail, you know, in olden days here, maybe when I started in IRS, could be, we used to send out a tax package to everybody who filed an income tax return. And that tax package was basically, it had all the forms you needed, looked like something like this. This is the 1040 instructions now, and this is about, you know, I don't know, 70, 80 pages. So we still have that. This is for paper filers who need it, but you know, we've scaled back over the years, and basically, you know, all of our publications, they're on irs.gov. That's the quickest way to get them, because in the beginning of the filing season, sometimes we're getting late tax law, and not everything is developed and put on the forms and pubs yet, but the quickest way is to get it online at irs.gov. And you know, you can absolutely have them sent to you if you like to do paper and you like to read books like this before you go to sleep at night, you know, because it's, you know, good bedtime reading maybe. So that's still available. You can get that. You can call us. IRS.gov, just click on the forms section. You can order all the stuff via the website. There's a phone number on there that you can also call to get it. So, yeah, forms and pubs are there. some of the pubs don't come out till maybe a week, a month or two into the filing season, because it's just one of those things that it's not finished yet, the publication. So a couple other things I would like to mention, and we sort of touched on this past year, and that is the pandemic and financial difficulties that people had. If they had job loss, debt forgiveness issue, or they tapped into a retirement fund, there's a lot of things, there's some tax angles to that that they need to really check up on. And we have a special section on the website called the What Ifs for struggling taxpayers. So if they just type the what ifs into the IRS.gov web search, they can find out what they need to do in those situations. So that's really, in terms of filing a return, you want to go ahead and pull out last year's return, to use it to go by. Hopefully you've printed it if you've, done it on software, or your return preparer should have given you a copy. You take that out. Then you look through IRS.gov to see what's new, what credits may have changed, and, then you go ahead and start filing your return. And again, electronically is the best way to go. It's going to ask you questions. The free file program's available, or you can buy the software, or you can, if you have a good return preparer, knock yourself out. They do cost money. But they're great preparers out there, and for those who qualify, we have the volunteer help sites done. And when you go to those sites, make sure you bring all the relevant tax information with you. And just go ahead.
Kevin, how can someone find out about those tax preparer sites for those who might be income related eligible?
Sure. IRS.gov has a listing. You put in your zip code of the nearest volunteer help site. We have a special toll-free number that they can call if they don't have access to a computer to find the nearest one. And that toll-free number is 800-906-9887. Again, 800-906-9887. That's to find your nearest volunteer help site. And again, a lot of them are doing it remotely this year because of COVID. Some may have like a drop-off where they can just drop off the information and come back. Others, it may be an online thing. So at any rate, we want you to make sure you get all the benefits, the credits, and deductions that you're entitled to. One thing another thing with the economy, and that is the gig economy. Hey, you gig workers out there, and we know a lot of people are out there and have been, but with the pandemic, maybe a lot of people, needed to pick up extra income, or get a new job or whatever, but they're earning income by doing on-demand work, services, or goods, and it's often through a digital platform like an app or a website, and so all that income is taxable. So individuals must file a tax return if they have net earnings from self-employment of $400 or more from gig work, even if it's a side job, part-time, or temporary. So we have what we call a gig economy tax center on IRS.gov where they can go to get more information about that. And lastly, I would say those folks who are eligible, I could go on forever, but I don't want to take up too much. But is the Earned Income Tax Credit. And we appreciate all of our partners out there who help people, with their returns, but also just awareness for the Earned Income Tax Credit. And I know your office has been very involved in it. And it's very largest federal refundable tax credit for low and moderate income workers. And the thing is, some people don't know about it, and they will never get the Earned Income Credit. I believe it could be as worth $6,600, $660. So if they don't file a return, they'll never get it. And because of changes, I think there's a 25% change rate that people, lose their job, or maybe they make too much income, that people, go in and out of it. So you know, we really want people to be aware of that earned income tax credit.
Excellent. Well, Kevin, I want to say thank you again for joining us. For everybody who has joined us midway through, Kevin McKeon is the chief of the IRS District Congressional Liaison Branch. Kevin's been just a tremendous resource today in answering questions, the frequently asked questions that we've been hearing from people across the 7th District of Virginia. Kevin, I know when you were joining with us, I know that you have been answering questions related to tax filing for many, many years. There's some great old videos out from C-SPAN years back of you continuing to just be a resource for community members and people across the country. So I want to thank you for your time today. For everybody tuning in, IRS.gov is a great place to start. We'll highlight in our social media and in our newsletter some of the particular resources that Kevin's mentioned today. Since those who are joining on social media, I would also mention that IRS has a good Twitter feed that you may want to follow that provides some updates, particularly relative to the American Rescue Plan. That's at IRS News. So for those who might be online, if you're watching us today, that's probably a good resource. But please feel free to join our newsletter. Spanberger.house.gov is our website. You can sign up for the newsletter, and we'll be sharing some of the information that Kevin gave us here today. But Kevin, on behalf of our entire congressional office, on behalf of the people of the 7th District, I want to thank you for your longtime service with the IRS. Your service to our country to keep things moving. I know this has been a really difficult year. We've talked a lot about the challenges that IRS has faced. Certainly, people across the country have faced it in their own workplaces. But I'm grateful to you and all of your colleagues for your work in clearing up the backlogs, being so responsive, you know, not only contending with the pandemic, but doing all the heavy lifting in getting those economic impact payments, those stimulus payments out to millions of Americans. That was certainly no easy feat, and one that IRS has not traditionally done in and to do 3 in a 12-month period of time is certainly a big lift. So thank you on behalf of everybody who's watching today and who will go back and watch it. It'll be available on our social media and website. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Kevin.